So look at this, guys. This bike has 12 hours on it, and you can already see that it's getting some sort of corrosion. And look inside that bushing, guys. You see how it's kind of got like some brown staining on it? That is from the water getting in there. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Last week we did an oil change on our 2023 KTM 450 XCF. That has around 12 hours on it. This week we're going to grease the suspension because they are notorious coming from the factory low on grease. Let's do this. This week we're going to grease all of the rear suspension. We'll probably take out the rear axle, grease that, probably pull the adjusters out and grease those. These adjusters are notorious over the years for seizing themselves inside the swing arm. Especially if you use a pressure washer and stuff like that, it just drives water in there. It just causes a reaction between the aluminum and the metal adjuster. And I'm also going to grease the steering stem bearings as well. So we'll jack up the back end. And I don't know if I'm going to pull the swing arm out of it. Probably should. I mean, to do it right, I probably should. Yeah, I guess we'll just kind of start right here. We'll just start by loosening everything up. So this would be the shock mount. I imagine this probably had Loctite on it. I would assume. Yeah, it's got like some blue Loctite on it. I took the chain guide off on the bottom on the other side, so that would give me room to knock this pin out right here. This piece right here. There. So look at this, guys. This bike has 12 hours on it, and you can already see that it's kind of getting some sort of corrosion. We're going to lubricate that up to keep any water from infiltrating that and causing problems. And look inside that bushing, guys. You see how it's kind of got like some brown staining on it? That is from the water getting in there. So I'm glad we're doing this right now so that we can preserve this bike and not have these kind of problems in the future come up, that these fasteners don't come out. I'll push this shaft out so you can see it a little bit better, guys. There. It's going to run a little bit of Scotch-Brite down through the center just to get rid of any of that junk that's down in the center of that. We want to get that out of there. And I did the same thing with this pin. Just wiped it down really quick. And now we're going to give it a nice good coat of grease. Alright, I made a bit of a mistake when I did this. When I was taking this grease brush and shoving it down in there, the little needle bearings that were inside of this started to fall out. So when you do this, be super careful that you don't do the same thing that I just did. I got all the needle bearings back in it, but it was just kind of something that didn't need to happen if I was a little more aware of how all this stuff works. So I'm just going to be real careful when I put the grease inside of this, because I don't want to go, like I said, dragging those needle bearings out, creating more problems for myself. Yeah, I'm glad I'm doing this, guys, because a lot of these bushings and stuff were really hard to get out. Oh yeah, this is just so much more grease in it than the factory had. It's going to be so much better. The more we put in here, the less room that there is for water to infiltrate and cause rust and corrosion and just premature wear of these suspension parts. Now we can start putting it back together. So I want to be careful not to get grease on the threads of this. This is the lower shock bolt, but I am going to put it on the shaft of the bolt. So that way it doesn't rust inside the actual linkage itself. So now we've got the shaft of the bolt that has grease on it, and we'll put some blue Loctite on the threads so it doesn't back off. Alright, that goes in there. So again, we're just going to lubricate the shaft of this and keep the grease away from the threads so that we can put some Loctite on the head of this. Oddly enough, guys, that just glided right in there, which just goes to show you how dry it was from the factory. Man, I'm glad I'm getting to this right now, guys. It definitely needed it. So you see this too, guys? Same thing. Look, it's got that kind of that brown staining on it. That's kind of like corrosion, or it's starting to corrode. So we're going to get that corrosion off by wiping it down with some Scotch-Brite, and then we're going to lubricate it with some grease so it doesn't do it again. And this suspension will be smooth as butter. Just wipe it down with a paper towel, get all that junk off it. Nice. Okay, I'll go put it through the other side. Do the same thing, put some Loctite on it. We still got the front wishbone to do, and we've got the swing arm pivot point we still have left to do, and the rear axle. But let's torque these three that we have done, because these are 100% done right now. These two here look to be 44.3 foot-pounds. That's odd. This one is the same torque as these, 44.3. There. Now, so I don't lose track, kind of like what I've done, is I'm going to put a little dot on each fastener that I've gone through and torqued and greased. That way I know it got done. Next thing I'm going to do is take out the master link and take off the chain, and then get the rear tire off so we can lubricate the axle and lubricate these adjusters. I'm going to put a little rag over it, just hopefully so it doesn't scar up the nut. Well, surprisingly, this is pretty well lubricated, or sort of. It's got a little drop there and a couple attempts, it looks like, to put a little bit on there. Now we'll pull the adjusters out. We shouldn't have any problems with them right now, just because it's fairly new. Alright, we'll coat her up, give it a nice generous coat of grease, so we never have to worry about this rotting out and binding up inside that swing arm. There we go. I forgot to hit record. So what I did is I lubricated, while I had this apart, these pivots for the rear disc brake. So there's one here, and there's another one right here. And the way I did that is I pulled this pin out here, and then pulled out this pin. Then these two brake pads came out, these little gold pieces. And then I just grabbed this and pulled it this way, and it exposed the shafts, one there, and another one that was attached, I believe it was attached to the caliper if I remember correctly. Then I just put on a light coat of synthetic brake grease and then just slid it back together. So, and those were kind of dry too. Alright, let's get this back in now. And might as well grease the lips on these spacers here. That'll help keep grease out of the inside of the bearings. They're seal bearings, so there's not much you can do as far as keeping the grease out of the dirt out of those. They are what they are. And we'll do the same thing to the axle. Give her a nice coat of grease. Nothing pivots on this part, really. I mean, a little bit of it does, but for the most part, it's kind of just out in the open inside the wheel hub. But, I mean, you definitely don't want rust building up on this. And by putting a nice layer of grease on it, that's going to prevent it from rusting. Got the chain all adjusted. Now, just got to torque the axle to 59 foot-pounds. There we go. And I'll squirt some contact cleaner in here to get any of this excess grease out of there. There. Alright guys, I make these mistakes so you guys don't have to. So in order to grease the swing arm pivot, you're going to have to pull the swing arm back. Don't put the chain on, and don't put your other stuff back together if you want to grease this bushing right here that goes up here. To get to that, you're going to need to take off your plastic frame guards. There's only one anchor at the bottom right here, just a little 8mm socket, and then you got a wire tie at the top, another one that goes here, and you can see how these fit up in to this little side fairing. So to get it off the rest of the way, you just push it forward towards the motor and it'll come right out. The other side's a little bit simpler on that piece of plastic. And then pull out the bolt for your brake. So it's going to be this and this nut on the back side, and then that'll allow you to pull this down and lubricate in here just like we did all the others. I'm going to show you now putting it back together, because you don't need to see me take it apart and put it back together. And I had to use a press tool on this chain the last time when I put it together, so I want to show you how that press tool works to get this back together. Alright, now we'll just grease up this. And I make these mistakes, guys, so that you don't have to. Now, just take this little wishbone and slide it up between the frame again. And just push it through, that's it. Yep, just like that. Now the nut on this side, guys, is the one that has a flat mark on it. See that? And that you'll just line up with the flat on the frame and spin that side of the bolt. You can kind of get it started a little bit, but eventually it's going to stop. And then the brake bolt, that also is going to get some grease, but it's also going to get some Loctite on the thread. And put a little drop of Loctite on the back so the nut doesn't back off. I don't think it says it in my service manual, but it definitely had something on it. Alright, now with that done, you can see I've greased this shaft. It's just kind of like sitting here. And now I'm going to glide the swing arm back up into the frame area. Slide this through all of it. That also has to go through the motor too. There. Then we'll torque that on this side. But for right now, we'll just snug it up just a little bit. Put a little bit of tension on it. Keep everything together. There. Now we can finish putting our brake back together and the rear master cylinder. So we'll put a little dab of grease on this where it pivots up inside. We may even take this off and put a little dab of grease on that heim joint too. Now we'll go on the other side and we can put this through that linkage for the final time. Alright, so you saw how I took the chain apart. I end up using basically a chisel. Now to get it back together, you're going to need a press tool. This is the tool I have. It's called a PBR. It's made by Motion Pro. It's press, break, and rivet. And the way this works is you just back off this press piece right here. And then we're going to need this little mandrel piece. And that is going to line up like that. So then we'll back this off. And we're going to straddle the chain with this. You see how this has like a pin and a pin? That's to straddle the pins on the chain so that we can press that link in. I'll slide it on and show you kind of how that thing works. So there we go. And it kind of just like locks on there, guys. There we go. And that's on there right now. So you see how like the pin of the master link is straddled between this. So there's the pin of the master link. That's the plate that we're pressing right there, and that's the actual tool. You can see I was doing the same thing on the other side. Then we just thread our handle into it just to give us something to hold on to, just like that. And then we just put a wrench on it and turn this in, and it'll actually press that plate onto that master link. I'll try to zoom you in so you can see how it's working. So I'm just going to tighten this, then watch what happens right here. The reason this is doing this is because it's an O-ring chain. If this didn't have O-rings, you wouldn't have to press it on. It would just go together and you could slide your clip in. Okay, so keep watching it. You'll feel it eventually kind of like bottom out. The tool won't go anymore. There it is, right there, just bottomed out. Now I'll back off the tool and you'll be able to put the pin right on it, the clip. See how far that's pressed on now? And then we just snap it back together. And there it is. Just like that. Couldn't find the torque spec on this, and so I'm assuming it's probably just like all the others, which is like 45. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'll look into it, but I think it's probably the same as all the others. It's the same diameter, so they're like 44.3, or so I've just got it set for 45. Now that we got the back end together, that's just going to be so nice that we don't have to worry about the suspension rusting out, binding up, and seizing. This is going to last for a long time. Now we've got to work on the front suspension. So we'll work on getting the front wheel off, getting the axle out. Then we're going to pull out the forks and grease the steering stem bearings. So I've already loosened the pinch bolts on the fork on each side and over there. And I've loosened up this nut. So everything is pretty much just finger tight right now. Check that out, guys. I don't know if you can see it, but it's actually got a little bit of moisture on it. And this bike has been sitting in heated storage, temperature controlled, steady, constant heated storage for the last maybe month and a half. So this should have been dried off by now, but it's not. It's got quite a bit of water on it. I'll tell you guys, the more I work on this bike, the more impressed I get. Look, it's even got the QR codes, and those are etched into the fork legs. So if you bend a fork, all you gotta do is scan it with your phone and you can order it right instantly. It takes you right to an order page. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull out the brake pads. So we're gonna have to take out these pins, and that is gonna allow me to grease these pins right here. Just because I wanna make sure that they have, you know, a good amount of grease, because if you're putting grease in them, then that's keeping water out. Probably could put a little grease on that too. That looks pretty dry. Oh, there we go. Yep, there it is. And if you have any dirt or grime in here, you can just take a little nylon. It looks like a toothbrush. Toothbrush would even work. And just kind of like brushing out of there. These are pretty clean, so I didn't have to do that. And it's going to put a little bit of, it's just synthetic brake grease. Same stuff I used on the back. And I'm just going to put a little bit on this pin, because from the factory they were pretty dry. And like I said, we're not looking to put a lot, and you actually don't want a lot on this because it can actually create pressure inside of it and cause the brakes not to work right. You wouldn't want to just take it and put it inside this and just fill it up, because it's not going to work right. More is definitely not better here. You just want a little bit on there. Now we'll put our brake pads back up in there. Put a super light coating on this because I don't want dust and dirt getting attracted to it. Then we just reverse the order, and thankfully I take pictures of what I'm doing so I don't get fouled up, so I know that that goes that way. So I got a picture of that, so I know exactly that I put the pins back exactly the way they should be. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this next step this way, but I'm hoping that I can. What I'm hoping to do is leave the forks in it, leave the brakes hooked up, leave the handlebars hooked up, leave everything. Leave the lower triple clamp clamped to the forks, but just basically remove the handlebars, kind of flip them forward, and the top triple clamps, and then let the stem drop down through the neck of the bike about an inch so I can get some grease on that bearing. I hope this works. So I've pretty much got everything loosened up that I need to loosen, and you can see I've just put some straps around the handlebars because I'm going to allow them to swing forward. I'm going to pull off the front number plate also, just because there's just one screw that holds it on, and that way it'll allow hopefully these handlebars to come forward without, you know, hitting on the number plate. It's not putting any strain or stress on anything, so that'll be okay. Now we'll pull out the top triple clamp bolts. These ones I've already loosened. The bottom ones I haven't touched. Those are factory tightness. Now I've got to loosen this cap right here, so I'm going to put a paper towel over it so it doesn't scar it up. And I've already loosened this pinch bolt. So if I've done it right, this should slide right out. Look at that, guys. That was slick. I just had some wood under the fork legs, and those just dropped down onto the wood. And it left me a nice space to grease that bearing. Lucky for us, those bearings are greased really good. And we'll wipe some on there and put it back together. That saved a lot of time. Now with the lower one all greased, now we can pop the top one out and pack it. And I'm pleasantly surprised that there is a good amount of grease in them. You can buy bearing packers, but it's just as easy to do it by hand if you don't do them a lot. You just kind of pull the outside race up as you push the inside surface down, so it kind of like creates a gap. And what you're looking for is the grease to come pushing out in this little gap right here. Getting this back together should be pretty simple the way this is set up. All I'm going to do is lower the stand, which should feed the stem right up through the neck. We'll see. I think that's probably about as simple as it can get, guys. Honestly, I am totally impressed. Now it's time to put the triple clamp back on. I am going to put some grease on this. This is what puts the tension in the steering stem. The tighter you go with this, the tighter your steering will be. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on it because it is aluminum, just to keep it from galling inside where it threads in. Now, I'm not a mechanic, guys, so do these things at your own risk, obviously. This is what I'm doing to my stuff, so obviously if you do it to yours and the bolt comes undone because you weren't supposed to do this, you're on your own. And I'm just going to put a little bit of tension on it, just to get it up in there, get everything seated. Now hopefully when you took all this stuff apart, guys, that you looked where your handlebars were positioned and where your forks were positioned so you can get everything back to where it should be. These forks right here were positioned right on that line, and when I tightened down this bolt right here, or this, yeah, I guess it's a bolt, it basically just stopped. And it stopped right in that position there. So if I put additional tension on this, that is going to tighten up my steering, make it, you know, either looser or heavier to steer. We'll come back after and torque everything to spec. Right now we're just getting everything snugged, making sure everything lines up and looks fine. Now we will put on the front number plate. Now what I want to do is put the front tire on so I can actually feel the tension in the steering as it turns. This feels pretty good right here though, but I won't really know until I get the front wheel back on it. And while the wheel's off, this is a good time to check if you got any loose spokes. Just check them. I got a real good video on how to true wheels. If you want to check it out, I'll have a link up above. I would just keep doing the same thing. Grease it. Front wheel's all on. Now need to see how that's a little looser than I want it to be. Yeah, I think that feels pretty good right there. I just gotta torque everything back down. Alright, so looks like we gotta torque this to like 25.6. That's good there. Now we're gonna torque these to 15 Newton meters. And you want to go back and forth with these, making sure that they're both equally torqued. Now we'll compress the forks a few times to get the forks in alignment. Then we can torque the other side. And this pinch bolt is 177.8 inch-pounds, and it has Loctite on it. Then we're going to tighten the handlebars. Same thing, 14.8 foot-pounds. And you want to tighten them all evenly. And the torque for these top triple clamps are already stamped right in. It says 17 Newton meters right at the very top. And once you're done, make sure everything is just how you want it, and that it's got just the right tension. You don't want too much because it's going to steer heavy. But you can see just a little bit of pressure and these bars will kind of like go on their own. There's no notchiness. And this is a brand new bike, so it's going to get a little bit looser over time. But you can see like it's slowly turning by itself. But yeah, this feels really good. So if you guys are considering buying a new bike or even a used bike off like Marketplace or something, do yourself a huge favor. As soon as you get it, take it all apart, work on it, grease the suspension, because if it's brand new, chances are it doesn't have a lot. And if it's used, there's kind of a good chance that maybe the person that you bought it from hasn't done this. Plus, it's always nice to get your hands dirty and work on your own stuff so you know what needs to be done, because if you're buying something used, we all tend to see something that just doesn't look right that we need to fix. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. If this is something that you like, please don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks guys for watching my channel. We're growing every day and I appreciate it. See you guys.